All right, we are set. Just give everybody a minute. We have a good group on, so I'm glad everybody made it today. All right, let's go ahead and get started. We'll go ahead and introduce Carla. Carla works with 811 and she has joined me in a couple different meetings in a couple different settings to talk about 811. And she's the member services manager or coordinator. I'm not sure what her title is, but I'll let her introduce herself and then she can introduce Sanatam. So thank you, Carla.
Thank you, Amber. Good morning, everyone. Carla Sanchez, Director of Member Relations at 811. Thank you for having us this morning. The Member Relations Department at Colorado 811 is responsible for onboarding new members, supporting our membership, and assisting in maintaining the membership information up to date. So if it's contact information or maybe maps of where those underground facilities are, me and my team are responsible for assisting the membership and keeping that information up to date. So thank you again, and I'd like to introduce Sanatam. Sanatam is a damage prevention liaison for the Northwest region of Colorado, and he's going to take us through a presentation for the 811 law and membership.
Well, good morning, everybody. As introduced, my name is Sanatam. A little background on me is prior to joining Colorado 811, actually worked for a smaller ditch company. So I was actually a member with Colorado 811. And part of how I made that jump over to Colorado 811 is I was so impressed with the support that I received on questions and stuff like that. I thought, boy, I'd like to work for that company, and I made it. So part of what I look at doing, and I'm Northwest Colorado, we do have a liaison for everywhere across the state, is basically trying to bring the contact center to you. And I really look at trying to do whatever I can to support you guys and, of course, prevent damages. So thank you for the invitation today, and I'll go ahead and jump into our presentation here. So to start out with, we did have kind of a list of questions that Amber had provided from everybody. So we did try to basically tweak a presentation we had previously to make sure that we covered all of the questions that we did have on that. And to start out here with the law, one of the things I've noticed more and more as I interface with more and more stakeholders is a lot of people think that the law is new. I'll kind of go over a little bit on the timeline here, and we'll keep it pretty short. But the first excavation requirements law passed in 1981. Really was only 2 pages. It's fairly simple. Basically said you register with your local clerk and recorder. If somebody's damaging your facilities, you could go get an injunction on them from a judge. It wasn't very complicated. They opened it up again in 1993. Basically, that's where they said instead of permission, if a few different people wanted to get together and make their own association, they said, look, this is really going to work better if it's statewide. That was what I would call the official start of Colorado 811. They switched over to some civil penalties added in. So if you weren't following the law, there was some recourse and some penalties on top of that. Opened it again in 2000, where they basically really beefed up the penalties significantly. CDOT went in there and got an exemption. They also added something in about trying to track abandoned facilities. So as an excavator's out there finding utilities, ideally at some point they're going to say, hey, we know these are all out there, these are abandoned. If you find something besides that, that's probably a live facility. 2009, law got opened again, and the main thrust of that law was adding routine maintenance of existing planted landscapes. That was really for Colorado Springs, where they have the Olympic Training Center, OTC. Basically, they said every time we try to do work out here, we get our whole campus graffitied. There has to be a better way to do this, especially when we're really just talking sprinkler maintenance. Then in 2018, this is the most recent one, and this is the one that most people know about. A lot of people think that's where all the changes happened. I would say the law has been revised regularly, and would even say I'd expect it to be revised in the future. That created the Safety Commission, and I think that's what the big stir is about. Is basically this is an enforcement authority. It's going to be statewide with some exceptions potentially for home rule entities. Establish subsurface utility engineering. Also made a transition over to a true one call. Carla could probably talk to it better than I can, but basically all the testing that we've done with our tier 2 members pretty much show that around 35% of the excavators make those follow-up calls, and the remaining 65% of excavators did not make those follow-up calls to the tier 2 members as required by law. So that transition to a true one call, I believe, is the legislature's way of dealing with a known inadequacy in the system the way it was set up. And I'd like to point out that CDOT's exemption disappeared in 2018 too. So a lot of people talk about, oh, we're going to go for exemptions or whatever else. 2000 CDOT got exempted. 2018, the legislature reversed themselves and said, CDOT, you guys are going to have to participate too. And of course, future changes. None of us can guess what those future changes would be. If you guys have specific concerns and you have the ear of any of the legislators, that would probably really be the place to take up changes in the law. It's Colorado 811. We don't make the law. We don't enforce the law. We do what we can to educate our stakeholders about the law and try and help everybody be in compliance with the law. So Colorado 811, and this whole section is going to be heavy on the law. I don't want to actually read the whole thing because I think we'd all go to sleep. But basically what Colorado 811 is a nonprofit corporation. So we're not a state entity. We're a 501c4 public welfare and education company. And we consist of all the owners and operators of the underground facilities, which would be all of our people who register with us. I almost consider it like a co-op where we have all the members in there. Cost of everything we do split among our members. Hopefully the little members are paying a small amount. The really big members are paying their fair share as well. We're governed by a board of directors, which is representative of the membership of our associations. We do have, until the end of the year, a tier 2 board member. Got gas producers, pretty much any of the ones you'd expect. Electric co-ops, stuff like that. Special district, I believe. Don't quote me on that one though. It's been a little while since I've reviewed that part. But basically our board of directors is going to be the ones that approve our budgets, approve everything that we do. And you have representation through your members on the board of directors and have that impact on what we do as a company. So owner operators, I think this is a really important one. It's one from any number of different utilities. This isn't just irrigation groups. We've had some people with a well that serves 5 people, but it's a commercial entity. Homeowners associations, I'd especially throw in here where they say, well, why are we treated like a utility? In the law, an owner operator means any person, including public utilities, municipal corporations, political subdivisions, or other persons having the right to bury underground facilities in or near a public road, street, alley, right-of-way, or utility easement. Anytime I look at irrigation anywhere, whether it's an open ditch, buried pipeline, laterals, any of the rest of that, I hope everybody would agree that they have an easement that goes along with their facilities, even if it's only a prescriptive easement. If you didn't have the right to use that property to put your water across it, how could you ever maintain it? And person, I'm not going to read through the whole thing here, but basically person is really, really broad in the law. And I think certainly a mutual lateral, mutual ditch, any kind of irrigation conveyance that's not for a single person would probably qualify as person under the law. We have underground facility, and for what we do at Colorado 811, the underground facility is really the most important part to us. It's going to be personal property, so obviously if nobody owns it, abandoned or whatever, that's not going to be an underground facility anymore. Buried or placed below the ground for use in connection with, have the highlights in there, conveyance of water, which includes pipes, valves, lines, and attachments thereto. So I kind of have the light blue highlights on all the things I think would really qualify and are appropriate to you guys. Basically, if it's private property, it's under the ground and it's used for any of the highlighted things or the attachments. That would include any of the above ground structures. that's going to be an underground facility. One of the ways I do like to point that out too is if somebody comes and damages your access to your facility, to your pipeline by, we'll just say, putting a road over it, building a shoulder up over it, building a shed over it, or anything like that, really, they can be charged with damaging your facility because they're denying you access to your attachments or any of the rest of that. This is another change that was really recent. So I'd say up from that 1981 or whatever up until 2018, there's no exemption for homeowners. With that change in the law, they basically exempted any homeowner. There was case law previous to that, which was Wycon versus Wheat Ridge, where a sewer company basically said, hey, we own and operate the main. Each homeowner is responsible for their line coming up to our main. A judge looked at it and basically said, look, we can't expect anybody and everybody with a sewer line that goes out to a main in the public right of way to be a registered member. And the legislature opened up the law. They did change that to include not applicable to any homeowner. And I read that as singular, not groups of homeowners, but that's in there. And the other part, and it feels like backing up a little bit here, but what they talk about other thing it doesn't apply to, and that's that section A across here. It's basically any owner or occupant of the property, if no part of the facility is located in a public street, county road, alley, right-of-way dedicated to public use. So I'd say pretty much unless it's like your irrigation system, where at some point on your property, it's yours, and from there on, the rest of your property, it's only on your property and it's only for your own use. You wouldn't be registering for that. But if you're out in that public right-of-way, county street, road, alleyway, easement, pretty much are considered an owner-operator. Marking underground utilities. A lot of the time when I give this part, this is the part where I like to say, oh, there ought to be a law. And just to throw that out to the people who feel a little reluctant on this, imagine there weren't any laws about it, where people could just dig anywhere, anytime. How would it work that way? And I would say, obviously, it didn't work that way, or they probably wouldn't have put those laws into place. Part of this that I have highlighted in green speaks to the cost. A lot of people say, look, we ought to be able to recoup the cost from the excavator. And the law points out that those markings are going to be provided at no cost to the excavator. The utility owner or operator is going to use that reasonable care to advise the excavator of any of the underground facilities in the proposed excavation area by providing markings within 18 inches horizontally from the exterior sides of the facility, according to the APWA Uniform Color Code. So pretty much for irrigation, that's going to be purple, and 18 inches on either side, that's kind of how accurate you need to be. So if you have a 10-inch lateral and you're not sure exactly where it's at, the mark that you put on the ground is within 18 inches of the horizontal sides of that facility. You did your job. There are rules for the excavator about what they need to do within the tolerance zone when they're working. If you did a good job marking it, somebody else damages you, you've got a lot of recourse to the law because you did what you're supposed to do. Similarly, if you don't provide those marks, all the bad things can come back to you. Another thing that they added in is the marking of customer-owned laterals in the public right-of-way. And that's, again, a change in 2018. And the big part of that is basically going back to that Wycon versus Wheat Ridge. They say, who's the best prepared, equipped, has the manpower, hopefully the know-how, the historic information to best try and help the excavators find where these laterals are, outside of making absolutely every person responsible for any line of their own that's in the public right-of-way. Where the legislature added some burden onto the facility owners, they also basically put the part in there saying that the owner operator is not going to be liable for those markings for those private facilities or the customer owned laterals. So it's basically trying to provide more information to the excavator so that the excavator doesn't just have to guess, but hold the owner operator harmless for trying to do the best they can to provide that information. Excavators on here, they have a whole bunch of stuff listed out there. As an irrigation entity, there's a good chance you do excavation from time to time. Main thing I put on here for this is that excavation does not include routine maintenance on the existing planted landscapes, which we've already mentioned, any form of existing agricultural activity that's routine for that ranch or farm, land clearing, if it's not deep ripping or deep root removal, and routine maintenance of an existing irrigation facility if it's been within the past 24 months. Part for the ranchers, I would consider more is doing routine maintenance on those existing fence lines. I think it's pretty gray in the law, but as a whole, I'd say that the legislature's really kind of reduced the exemptions for farmers and ranchers, or tried to tighten up with better language what exactly they consider to be exempt and what still is going to be considered excavation. Now, Safety Commission, so this is a big component of the law. A lot of this was really pressed forward by PHMSA, the Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. They are in charge of the Department of Transportation, regulated interstate gas pipelines. Basically, they looked at all the different states, sent out a 5-question questionnaire. One of the questions on there was, in the last year, has the state done any enforcement relative to the 811 laws? When Colorado answered that no, they basically came back and said, we consider your enforcement to be inadequate. Colorado is still in that inadequate state as far as the DOT and PHMSA are concerned, but Colorado hasn't really been doing a bad job. If you really look about our statistics compared to the rest of the nation, we're always in the top quarter as far as low damages per tickets called in, transmissions put out, pretty much any way you look at it. Colorado's really been doing a good job on that end. PHMSA doesn't think that we have adequate enforcement. So as part of that, PHMSA basically said they're going to reduce funding to our state by 4% a year after a certain year, basically with the carrot and the stick. That's going to be our punishment. That PHMSA part that does funding for Colorado's pipeline education amounts to about 80% of Colorado's funding for that. So if they reduce it by 4% a year, that's really a 3% cut to our budget every year after that date comes and goes. So that brings us back to the Safety Commission. This was the Colorado legislature answer to inadequate enforcement. Basically, so we're going to make a statewide safety commission. They're going to basically take any complaints about alleged violations of the law, investigate those violations or alleged violations, and decide if it was indeed a violation of the law. They're going to deal with the penalties and remedial action, have all the power of the state to collect. So it's not something where a fly-by-night guy is just going to say, oh, I'll just ignore the phone calls from the collectors. If they wanted to get heavy-handed with anybody, they could. And part of it that I like to put on here is about the civil penalties. So pretty much everything that was in place prior to these changes is still in effect. So you could get hit by the Safety Commission, you could still get hit through civil penalties on top of that in parallel. Potentially, there's a lot out there that could happen. Then I have the asterisk on the bottom is you have home rule counties, and that's something that's set up in our Constitution where some counties or cities have reserved the right to rule themselves in matters of safety. And we're not sure how that's going to get dealt with. If you look on Wikipedia or anywhere like that, you could look at all the different home rule counties, cities and counties. The Safety Commission has not heard back from all of those entities to see who wants to take on that authority themselves or who wants to delegate it. So if you happen to know or find out that you're in a home rule county, it's really going to change a lot of the discussion potentially. Or at some point, I think if the home rule counties don't put their own Safety Commission in place, probably the statewide Safety Commission will say your lack of action is going to result in us taking care of that in your place. So we have non-compliance from two different angles. Like I mentioned, we had the newly formed stuff, which involves the Safety Commission, and we have the older stuff that was the civil penalties that's still in place. Main thing I put on here is here's the guidance that was set in the law, where we have the minor, moderate, and major offenses. And down here across the bottom, they have it set up where if you're a multiple offender, the metrics, so to speak, on that can go up. If you've done enough minors, maybe they're going to say, hey, we think that's a moderate offense because you're a routine offender, or maybe you have a bunch of moderates and they say, look, we don't seem to be getting your attention. We're going to treat it like a major. Those are suggested maximums. Everything I've heard from the Safety Commission still up to this point is they really want to lean harder on education, change the behavior, have people do what they should do. Fines are not tied to the state budget, so it's not like they're going to go out and be really punitive so that they can collect revenues to help the general fund. Any of the fines that they have are basically going to be turned around into damage prevention programs like education, something else like that. So non-compliance with the civil penalties, and again, this is kind of touching on where Amber talked about kind of, I think I have it here, implications of non-registration or non-compliance. Every owner operator is supposed to join the State Notification Association. I think we've touched on that already. Anybody who doesn't join that association can be liable for a civil penalty of $200. So basically, if somebody just says, hey, whatever, ABC Mutual Ditch Company, I've been out here working before, I know you guys aren't registered because you didn't come up on my ticket. I'm going to hire a lawyer, talk to the local district attorney or something, and I want to try and get this $200 fine on you as a way to try and force you guys into membership. They can do that. They could have done that since, I want to say 91. It doesn't happen very often, but it's out there. If you're looking at the next part here, which talks about something being damaged because an owner-operator failed to comply with registering, the civil penalty starts at $5,000 there. That's really where, at least among the people I've seen that go through the effort for civil penalties, that's where it becomes worth their time, where they say, look, we're going to hit you for that $200 and the $5,000 on top of that because clearly you didn't register. Now the damage occurred because you didn't register. I've heard of one of our members going after excavators who have pretty much a similar tiering for not calling in before they excavate, where they sent that $25,000 civil penalty more than once. So some people do go for it. It does happen. I don't want to say it never happens. It definitely does. But part of how things have come so long without any changes is because there's not a lot of push for people to really enforce what was already available in the law. I would say even with the Safety Commission changes, a lot of people are still reluctant to use the Safety Commission to do enforcement as well. And continuing with the non-compliance on the civil penalties, they pretty much just ramp up. So if you got hit 4 times and the excavator in all 4 of those cases within a 1-year period went after that civil penalty could go up to $75,000. And if it's over 4 in that 1-year period, it could just keep coming in at $75,000 as a maximum. So I haven't heard of that actually happening to anybody, but when we talk about what's the potential damage, I'd say the potential damage is you can get hit by the Safety Commission and civil penalties for the same offense with a pretty significant ratcheting up of fines. So that's kind of what you're up against. When we talk about the cost of being a member, the cost of complying with the law, cost of locates and whatever else, and paint and time and effort, that's your investment on one end to avoid the potential bad stuff that happens on the other end for non-compliance. Other stuff I have in here, and it's again just to paint that picture. If something bad happens, you fail to register, you fail to market, you're not only liable for any cost incurred by the excavator, so we could say delay in the excavation, downtime. You're also going to be responsible for reasonable costs and expenses of suit, including legal fees, damage to persons or property, and you're also going to be in charge of indemnifying the excavator in court. And so a real life example I have from Mesa County, not Mesa County, Eagle County is up by Vail. We had a tier 2 member at the time, got hit and it flooded 2 houses in Vail. They had a really strong case and they ended up prevailing, basically saying, hey, they didn't contact us as a tier 2 member. We found out the ticket that these guys called in and they didn't notify us. They broke the law. After litigation and everything, last number I heard was $3.6 million. And a lot of that would have been litigation, not so much property damage at that point. But that's definitely out there. If you happen to cause loss of life, anything else, it all could stack up. So you could be defending yourself, you could be defending the excavator. I don't know, worst case scenario. Obviously, it's really ugly. I'd hope nobody'd ever get to that. And following all that, civil penalties are paid to the prevailing party, and that's on top of the safety commission stuff where the money goes to their education fund, for lack of a better term. And I just have it highlighted in there. So I guess we covered it 3 times, and this will make 4, but basically safety commissions, enforcement authority, don't limit or restrict any of the other remedies at law. So that's the bad news. Hopefully everybody has a smile left in them. Sorry for that, but there it is in the law. 811 process. Pretty much all of our owners or operators are supposed to join in the notification association, provide us with their utility locations, and provide us with contact information. And when it works right, the excavators are going to call or use one of our online tools at least 2 business days, not including the day of the request, prior to beginning their excavation. As a tier 2 member now, if we have any tier 2 members on, these excavators are still supposed to reach out to you by law, even though Colorado 811 has been providing that locate information behind the scenes since, I want to say, the start of 2019. Carla, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's right.
So basically, Colorado 811 at our contact center, we're going to take that excavator information, we're going to overlay that with our members mapping. Pretty much anybody who's affected potentially by that excavation, based on where they have their mapping at, is going to receive that information directly from us as a tier 1 member, or they're going to receive it directly from us and get a referral as a tier 2 member till that January 1st, 2021 deadline for transitioning over to a tier 1 member. After getting that information, the members or their contractors, a lot of our members use hired contractors to mark their utilities, or it should go out and mark those utilities prior to the due date or respond clear for the tickets where they say, hey, look, you were close enough, we got that notification, but we're actually not in your dig area, you're clear to dig. All the members, and again, or their contractors, need to post a positive response through Colorado 811. So that was a recent change where they said instead of the contractors trying to figure out how each member provided that information, they said all the members provide the information to Colorado 811. As an excavator, you just have to come to Colorado 811 to get all the information related to your ticket. Then on the bottom here, the excavators work using due care and caution. And that's when things work right. Things don't always work right, of course. So the member responsibilities of the contact center, obviously to register, keep your contact information up to date, especially in my experience, like homeowners associations, some of the little smaller utilities, they might have a change of staff and they might not ever remember to update. Route County, I had somebody who I walked in their door and said, hey, I've had a hard time getting hold of you guys. Googled you and figured out where you're at. How are you doing? And they said, oh, that's like 3 emails old at least. So I said, well, how did you do any of your locates for the last however many years? And they just said, well, we just thought nothing was going on. So please keep that up to date. If you do change people, have some sort of process in there where that information is going to change as people change. Maintain a functioning email address. Receive the one-call notifications. That's going to be through that email address. Keep your notification area up to date. An example in Mesa County here is one of our irrigation members put in some electric for some of their canal controls with SCADA and canal automation. Put in a ticket. It called me upset because they hit power. I said, oh, darn it, you know, somebody didn't register their power here. Now we hit it and we're going to have this big delay. Somebody went up to the canal and realized that their canal automation wasn't working anymore and realized they hit their own electric supply to their own automation because they hadn't updated their mappings. Their locator didn't get the locate. They didn't come out and mark their own electric. Good news is they hit their own stuff. Bad news is they hit their own stuff. Then report the damages to DIRT within 90 days of the restoration of service. That's another thing that's in the law, and the law says that the contact center would set what that number is, and basically if it costs anything, we'd like you to report it to DIRT, and the law requires it. The responsibility of the excavators is respond to each ticket that you receive by the due date by either marking the facilities and providing the positive response or providing an all clear. Through Colorado's positive response system, you need to include all the required supporting documentation, which is a lot, but we'll cover that too. So we're kind of covering marking standards again. We covered it in the law before. I know the question of permanent markings came up, and that's why it's relevant to have it in here again. The top part in the blue and the white there is as it's written in the law. At least the way I read it, I say if you fit with your permanent markings, all the things on there, I think you could be in compliance with the law, but I'm not the one that decides. So of course, if you have legal counsel, if that's something you can take up with the Safety Commission and really pin them down to have an opinion on it. There are plenty of smaller members that discuss that as an option. I think there are some things that could really work well with it, but none of it's going to work without some maintenance and some care. So even if you had permanent markings, I'd still say maybe ditch rider or somebody once a month goes and checks everything, make sure it's in good order, potentially turn that into part of what you normally do and document it. So if something does go wrong, you've got some recourse, and it's not the excavator saying that you didn't use reasonable care. And again, on the marking standards, those customer-owned laterals, and I think that could affect any ditch company, could affect any mutual lateral, pretty much unless it's your own personal delivery. That expectation could be there. So just keep that in mind. On providing that positive response, you need to provide a positive response. They do have a comment section that would go with the ticket. I always look at that comments part as a good opportunity to cover yourself and document things so that a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, if something comes back, there's something in the comments that are going to help show what happened that day, help jog your memory, help something. It's a permanent record for as long as we keep it, which isn't permanent that way, but that can really help, especially if you have a change of staff or anything else. Something comes back to you after staff is gone and you can't get a hold of them, you might be able to look through that documentation and build your case to cover yourself. Per the law, a little farther down there, quoted, this is what it says the positive response attachment should include. It's basically documentation showing your name, size, and type of the marked underground facility. You don't know the size of your pipes or anything like that. As you learn that, I would say definitely capture that information and save it for posterity. One of the ways that's important, if you do mark just the center line on your facility, you mark on there what size it is, the excavator is expected to do the math. So if you have a 10-inch plastic irrigation pipe there with a center mark that says 10-inch PIP, they're going to have to add 5 inches for half of the width plus the 18 inches for the tolerant zone to that. And that's the area where they have to use non-destructive means to find your facilities. Other ways that's useful, an example from Palisade, where they had a road project. A facility owner had marked on there that the excavator should be looking for a piece of 2-inch plastic pipe. The excavator excavated under the marks looking for it carefully, found a 3-inch iron pipe, basically called back the facility owner and said, look, I didn't find a 2-inch plastic pipe, I found a 3-inch iron pipe. Is that the one? I gave that member a chance to come out there, look at it, look at their old records, and they said, oh, yeah, we put that plastic pipe inside of that iron pipe you found. That is the facility. You know, proceed with your excavation. Here in Grand Junction, in my area, they have had trouble, and I don't know exactly how many years ago, I want to say maybe 8 years ago now, a house blew up and burned down the neighbor's house, and it was because the facility wasn't properly identified. I don't know anything about the blame or any of that, but the more information you provide the excavator, the more clues that excavator is going to have to come back to you and say, you know what, I'm not comfortable with this. I don't think I found what I should have found. Could you come and make sure I found what we should have found? And if you look at your own records and you look at the pipe and you say, hey, it turns out that was a 17-inch PIP and we were expecting 15-inch, you could update your records, make those changes, and you'd know down the road. Great, no harm done, but it is that extra bit of communication that hopefully will open up from that. Then on the B section here is documented the location of the underground facilities in the form of a digital sketch, hand-drawn sketch, or photograph with readily identifiable landmarks where it's practicable. When we come back around to permanent markings, I think if you did have like a Google Earth or AutoCAD or some other form of how your ditch is. That could help a lot as a digital sketch. You could have sizes put on there. You could have potentially photographs of your permanent markings, identifiable landmarks where that's available. If the Safety Commission says that's an option, or if your legal counsel says that's an option, I think there are practicable ways that that could be implemented. How to budget. I think this is the one I get from HOAs and pretty much any small utility that was a tier 2. He's pretty much used to getting that phone call from the excavator, taking down the information, going and providing the locates, and that's pretty much the end of it. A lot of people are concerned about the cost for that transmission from us. And when I really look at it myself, I think that the transmission cost from us as a tier 1 member is really just the tip of the iceberg, but we'll let you decide. If you're really budget conscious, and I always like to put this as a shoestring budget or no budget, you really want to only register your underground facilities. The law doesn't say you have to register your open canal. If you have a box culvert where the road is more of a bridge over your canal, you wouldn't have to register that. I would say really only register what you absolutely must register according to the law. We can help you put a minimum 30-foot buffer on all of your facilities so that you're not going to be getting a bunch of extra notifications that are farther away than you can avoid. You might still get somewhere you say, you know, it's not right where we're at, but it's going to be fairly close. I know on the other side of the equation, when the excavators call it in, there's a 150-foot buffer added to their dig zone. And the main thing for that is to avoid damages. That's what we're more concerned about. Anything roughly $1.50. I think it's $1.49 this year. I don't know if there's a price set for next year, but you could pay for a lot of those for the cost of one damage that got missed. And that's the way we look at it, is we're more about safety, protecting against damages, and that's why those buffers are there, even though we have reduced them recently based on our member feedback. If you're budget conscious, you need to perform all your locates in-house on time, post a positive response on time, and it's going to be volunteers. How that's going to work is going to depend on how close you are with your other people on your mutual ditch or on your mutual lateral. Some places it's going to work all right. I could say some subdivisions I've been to with more than 1,000 people in them have 3 people on the board and 1 person's actually doing all of the work. So you're going to have to judge for yourselves how well you're structured. Do you have a way to adjust your budget? A lot of that, we're going to cover that on the next one too. Potential use of permanent markers. We've got a lot of people ask about it. I'd say you're going to find the Safety Commission stance here, obviously, and then that home rule really is a wild card. Maybe the Safety Commission comes out and says, hey, we think that's great. You're in a home rule city, and they say, no, it's not great. You're going to be potentially answering to both. If you're outside of the city and inside of the city, or outside of the home rule and inside of the home rule, you may actually have to follow by separate rules. If you have a really big district, you might have to follow multiple sets of rules. So just to throw that out there, that is a potential complication for everybody. You can economize for your positive response requirements. So a lot of that thing would be like up front, if you did a bunch of mapping, you determined all the sizes of everything, you get yourself a nice digital map. When you get in a locate request, you just say, hey, we're going to pull it to the appropriate part, take a screenshot of it, send it in. It's going to have our name on there. It's going to have the size and type of material. It's going to answer a lot of these questions, and it's just a screenshot. Obviously, that's going to take a lot of front-end work to probably nail down unless you have good records already. But on the back end, that could save a ton of times for somebody. With most of the people I talk about at the small utilities, I say, hey, you guys really need to have an all hands on deck and decide how collectively you're going to do it. Where previously, maybe it was only a little bit of work and somebody who's retired didn't mind doing it. Obviously, if it triples or quadruples the amount of work, it's only fair to share that responsibility. And I do have something on the next one about that too. And the other thing I like to point out is in-house coverage so that people can live their lives too. It's another thing we say is, oh, old Pete, he does all the locates, but he likes to go to California, visit his grandkids every year. What do we do for the month he's gone? Well, something you guys would want to have worked out well ahead of time. The next one we have here is for the budget flexible. You guys are going to be able to determine better than anybody where you fit on that. But basically, you could register extra facilities based on your perceived return on value. I know from one of the 6 irrigation entities in the valley here that have had electricians do work off season, didn't restore their canal banks properly, ended up with a canal leak, didn't turn into a really big deal, just turned into a maintenance issue. Luckily, they didn't have a canal failure and flood out all the houses below the canal or anything like that. But I know that's something they talked about. They said, do we want to know every canal crossing and everything else? Another thing that they looked at is permitting. And they said, hey, if we're collecting money for permits for crossing and we're really doing it expertly on the front end, the cost of the permitting and all the rest of that can offset a lot of the cost of being a member, a lot of the cost of marking, a lot of the rest of the associated costs. So that could be a possibility. Other things are buffers on the facilities beyond what's required based on other considerations like accuracy. We've had some members that say, hey, you know, our stuff got put in so long ago, radio detection didn't even exist back then, and even if it did, it probably never would have got a wire put on it. It's deep, we can't find it with the soil probe, but we know roughly where it works. I'd say in those areas, you might want to put a little bit more buffer on there than that 30-foot minimum to make sure you get that notification, and at least you can express it to the excavator. You say, look, we're going to mark it as best as we can. If you find it somewhere else, we'll take responsibility for fixing it. But if you happen to find it gently and it doesn't damage anything, please call us so we can document it and we can update our mapping. We can update all that information for down the road. Help us help you. Another consideration is buffers beyond the minimum buffers based on the importance of that facility. I can think of a force main. It would have been in Eagle County. Basically, an excavator damaged a force main that was pumping raw sewage into the river. And they decided after that that they might put a huge area around that. So if there is any kind of discrepancy about how the thing got processed, they're going to be overly cautious because they basically said, look, we can't have that happen again. High pressure gas lines, fiber optic lines, some of those have the same attitude where they're like, we'd rather pay for 100 extra tickets than miss one mismapped one that really causes us a major damage. Another option here for the budget flexible is pay for in-house help. So potentially at a cheaper rate, if you have people who are retired, if you have people who maybe stay-at-home moms, somebody who could say, hey, I can take all these tickets and I can call the ditch rider so he doesn't have to check his phone all the time. I've heard some pretty ingenious ways that go around that. They say, hey, if you go and mark that ticket, you know, we'll pay whoever marks the ticket $10. If somebody wants part-time work, somebody wants extra work, you got a responsible teenager who's familiar with the system and reliable. Lots of different ways to do that. Even if it's just paying somebody a pittance, and I'd say that's what my own homeowners association does, is the pump crew for us does not pay dues. That's not nearly what they're worth, but it is some sort of recognition of what still amounts to really a volunteer job for the whole subdivision. Or hire professionals, and all the feedback I've had on that is expensive. How expensive that is could vary by the area you're in, who you can get it to do it for you. If you can sort the tickets first and you only have them do the tickets that need to be located, lots and lots of variables in there based on how flexible your budget is. But whether you do it in-house or hire professionals, you still want to make sure all the locates are done on time, post positive responses on time. And on the positive response, especially, it's not just a matter of violating the law, it's the extra expense of getting re-notifications from us at, we'll call it roughly $1.50 each time. Lots of things you can do, hopefully, to economize for that positive response based on your budget. But if you've got more budget than time, maybe you let that slide a bit and you just say, hey, when we get the time and we can get around to it, we can. In the meantime, we've got enough budget to keep going without causing too much of a disruption of people's time, which may be more valuable. User create a mechanism to share the cost. So I don't know if that's incorporating, if you're a special district, if you're a homeowners association, metropolitan district, mutual ditch company, lots of different ways to do it. Some of them do have mechanisms in place already, and maybe you say, hey, it's time for us to take a look at what we're charging per share. It's time for us to take a look at whatever other mechanism is there, so that basically we can adjust the expenses and the cost so that they go hand in hand. So again, share the expense. One of the homeowners associations I talked to had the original shares. Stuff has been subdivided, but they just kept the original share with the original plots. You might have 50 homeowners on a little piece of property that are paying the same for all those homeowners as a single farmer's paying for the same amount of property next door. Personally, I don't think that's very equitable, but it's one of those things to consider. Maybe there's some way to adjust your mechanism so it makes more sense and that costs are shared more equitably. And the other thing is monitor your locators, whether it's in-house locators or it's a hired professional. At the end of the day, as the facility owner operator, you're going to be the one that's held responsible for your locators. If you hire somebody who's great and they do a great job, that's great, but keep an eye on them, because at the end of the day, if somebody complains to the safety commission, it's the facility owner operator's responsibility to do that, whether you do that in-house or you do that through a professional contractor. Resources. Hopefully this is some good news for you. Member relations, Carla and her team, I think are absolutely excellent. The feedback I get from our members has always been positive. They've really earned it. Thank you, Carla. Great team you have. They're going to be handling all of your contact information, notification area, updates, anything member related. They're the ones to go to. So the liaisons, we're the ones that bring the contact center to you. Wherever you are in the state here, you can get this off of our website, colorado811.org. Wherever you are in the state, you're going to have a local liaison. Normally, before COVID, we'd travel, we'd come to you, we'd help. I still do everything I can by webinar. Still happy to help. Our job hasn't changed. What's really changed is only part of how we do it. Plus, do have a lot of other education stuff, and certainly anytime member relations calls me with a member related thing, I'm always happy to help. So learn more about the legislation online. Hopefully we kind of gave you most of what you need to know based on the questions we got ahead of time, but if you have more questions, we're gonna have to talk here quickly. If you have more follow-up down the road, we don't need to do a webinar. You can reach out to us, member relations, Amber, work through Amber, whatever works well for you. We're here to help. We have some tools available. Pretty much everything blue on there is obviously stuff that's you own or we have available to you. It's your phone. iDig 811, which is an online app. Ticket Express, which is another online app with a few restrictions on it. Web ticket entry is a really full-fledged thing. So those are all, I would say, excavator tools, including that update light. Positive response is used by our members primarily to post that response, but also used by excavators to check the responses, go out to their job site, make sure what they got in their positive response matches what they see on the job site, and do follow-up if they don't. We have the Colorado 811 app, which is currently available for iOS, but it's got a lot of those same things available on it. Pretty convenient on your phone. So instead of going through your browser, you can go through the app. You have Excavator Expedite, which again is for excavators, but that's as part of being an excavator membership with Colorado 811, which is not compulsory at all. It's basically people who support what we do and say, hey, we want to bring a little more to the system as an excavator. And my understanding is their dues basically go towards trying to build better future apps to help the excavators so that the members aren't paying for the excavators, tools, or apps. Now the web ticket management system, and I think that's a great thing for small to medium utilities. Unless you're a really big water district, it could probably do everything you need. They have a new version that's going to be a HTML version, which you can do from pretty much any smart device. Again, Carla, correct me if I'm wrong. So pretty exciting that that's coming up. You have the grid and polygon maintenance tool. If you want to update all your own mapping in-house, you can do that. There is a restriction on that that's built into the tool of 150-foot minimum buffer. If you want to go smaller than that, you need to go to third-party tools or your own GIS department or something else like that. Then the damage information reporting tool on our website, that's where you're required to report those damages. I'd love to hear from somebody else now. Questions, anybody? I think, Carla, if you don't mind, I'll let you take lead while I get some water in me. And if you want to kick it over to me, please do.
Sounds good. Thanks, Sonatum.
Does anybody have any questions for either Carla or Sonatum?
Yeah, I've got a couple questions. My name's James. I'm with Grand Valley Irrigation Company. I don't know if Sonatum remembers me, but either one of you guys can answer. First question, one of the things we've been running into is when locate requests are submitted for a particular area, 811 will put a buffer around the entire property. And if it's a sizable piece of property, that buffer might overlap our facilities in like a different area, maybe a quarter mile away. So we're getting locate requests for our facilities that are just way far away. Is there any word on whether that process will be fixed so we're not having to pay for these extra locate requests?
So we do, as far as our mapping information goes, we've got street center line information, we have parcel information in some counties. We also have an address point that we gather all of this mapping information directly from the county. And so when there's new subdivisions being built and those streets or those parcels are not on our mapping, we do overcover that excavation site to make sure we don't miss any members. As far as the buffer goes on the property or on the parcel boundaries, the buffer was reduced from 250 feet down to 150 feet. And really, the analysis was done in that reduction to make sure that we weren't, not notifying facility owners that really did have underground facilities in the area. So at 150 feet, it was still, taking precautions, erring on the side of caution, and having, damage prevention in mind. And also by reducing the facility owners' maps, that was also at 250 feet. We reduced it to a minimum of 30 feet. So technically you could be receiving locate requests that are up to 180 feet away from your underground facility. And so there's a couple of different things that come into play, right? We want to make sure that we've got the most up-to-date information from the county as far as streets and parcel boundaries go. We want to make sure that the facility has reduced their area of notification so that you don't receive locate tickets that are so far away from your underground facilities. And then also take a look at the accuracy that locate request is being processed. So 70% of our tickets are being processed online by a homeowner or by a professional contractor. 30% of the tickets are processed by our agents in-house when someone dials 811 or reaches out to 811 to have that ticket processed. So you can reach out to 811, provide us with the ticket number. We'll do some research and figure out if it's maybe mapping information is needed, or maybe a facility buffer needs to be reduced, or if it's an inaccurate process notification, we can properly train and educate whoever processed that ticket to process them correctly or more accurate, if you will. So we really take it on a ticket by ticket basis because a lot of different things go into play and a lot of different things can happen. So feel free to reach out to either the liaisons or member relations with ticket numbers. We'll do some analysis, some research, try to figure out exactly what happened on that locate request, and either provide coaching and education to the person processing the ticket, or maybe if it's a mapping issue, go out to the county and see if the county has any new information on what the streets or the parcels. And Sonatum, if you have anything to add, please feel free.
Yes, please. Well, I say, of course I remember you. How are you doing? Nice to see you by webinar.
Yeah, doing pretty good.
Hopefully it's not putting words in your mouth here, but I think I have an understanding of the issue you're having. And I think Carla, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I think they're talking about if you're doing a fence at your house and you're doing a fence in the front yard and it's right by the road. When we process the ticket, they're going to take the whole parcel, they're going to buffer the whole parcel. You're the irrigation company that's running behind the house. You might be 200 feet away from where they're actually doing that work at. But because that buffer gets added to the parcel, they're still getting a ticket. Would that hit pretty close there?
Yeah, it is that, and even more exaggerated in some circumstances to where it's, you know, not even just 200 feet, but 500, 600, 700, 800 feet away, you know, just because the parcel's so large. Does that make sense?
Like the trailer park example.
Yeah, that does make sense. Yeah. So currently our procedure is just that. If they're digging on a particular property, we verify if we have any parcel information, any parcel boundaries, and we are using the parcel as the excavation site, regardless where on that parcel you're planning on digging. And so that 150-foot buffer is added to the parcel boundaries. Obviously, if they're leaving the parcel or, you know, heading in a different direction off the property, we will continue to highlight the excavation area in the direction and in the footage that's requested. I can definitely take that feedback to our procedures committee. We have a procedures committee that's made up of board of directors, facility owners, excavators, and one call, Colorado 811. And really they review the current procedures on how tickets are being processed, what information is available, and you know what's going to really mitigate risk. So I'll definitely take your feedback about not using the parcel boundaries as an actual excavation site, and more of I plan on digging in the front yard on the south side and using that as the actual excavation area instead of the entire boundary. But again, feel free to reach out with specific ticket numbers and we'll do some research and figure out how you were notified.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Carla. That was pretty much exactly what I was getting at. I understand that doing it a different way would probably be a nightmare for you guys on your end. I mean, it would simplify things greatly just using the parcel, but like I said, it's resulting in a lot of extra locate requests for us. But yeah, I appreciate your answer. The second question for either one of you, is there any word on when that HTML version of WebTMS is going to be coming out?
We have deployed the WebTMS program. We're currently developing training videos. We feel that it's very user-friendly, and by watching a couple of videos, you would be able to interact with the software. So once the training videos are available, we would, you know, have you fill out an application to use the program. We would get you set up and have you start receiving your locate tickets in there. But it is available now. We've tested it. Found some bug fixes that needed to be done. We wanted to make sure that it also was in compliance with the law. Now that you have to provide photos or sketches, we wanted to make sure that WebTMS had that capability of adding images. And so it is available. It has been deployed. We're currently doing training videos. Once those training videos are complete, we'll let our membership know where to find those videos and how to get registered to start signing up for it. So I'm thinking within the next month or so, those videos will be done and people will be able to start registering to use it.
Okay. Thank you, Carla. That's all I had. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, James. Does anybody else have any questions that they'd like to ask them? And just so you know, we are at noon, so if you need to pop off, by all means, you can absolutely do that. But if you have some questions, feel free to email them to me, or we'll stay on for a little bit longer as well so that you can continue to answer or ask your questions as well, as long as that's okay with Carla and Sonatum. Perfect. So anybody else? Go for it.
I'm looking at the statute. It says every owner or operator of an underground facility in this state shall join the notification association. And you spoke of that earlier. How many irrigation ditch companies have joined? What's the situation of this association membership, if you will?
Sure, we do have quite a few ditch companies and irrigation companies that are registered. I don't have an exact total of how many are currently registered. I could look that up and maybe provide that to Amber so she can share it with you.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Sure.
A variation of that question is, I'm a lawyer, but this is new to me. The ditch company that I'm thinking of has about 25 miles of ditches. Some are open ditches, some are in pipes. With that kind of distance, there's great variation. Is the perception that irrigation ditch companies need to notify, or need to join rather?
Carla, if you don't mind, I'll jump in.
Please do.
I know like the federal government, for any of their projects, they definitely require them all to be registered with us. The ditch company that I came out of had an improvement contract with the government, and we were supposed to join as part of that, basically to do the O&M into perpetuity. So they got to receive the benefit of piping the laterals, which was in our case to get the salinity out of the water. I would say we had probably close to 80 miles worth, and it was absolutely all registered, and we'd go and we'd locate it and we'd do all of that. Because basically all of our stuff went from an open canal, which would be like, I would say most of GBIC's canal here who was on. We still do have a lot of canals that are almost entirely open. If you had a canal that had a culvert or anything else like that, where it's going to be a siphon is probably a better example, where part of it's underground, I would say you need to register the part that's underground, but that doesn't mean you have to do anything with the open canal. And I did try to stress on that, but if your whole system's pipe, I'd say it needs to all be registered. If it's a mix of open and closed, whatever's underground needs to be registered, whatever's open canal doesn't need to be, unless you find there's some value in there potentially to knowing what's going on around it. But I wouldn't say it's required by law.
And last question, and then I'll shut up. We have common scenarios where fiber optic pipes go under the ditch. It happens all the time. Should the Xcel Energy or whatever entity that's putting the fiber optic pipe cable under the ditch, should they be joining the association? Or should the ditch company? We're not putting the fiber optic under the ditch.
Right.
Xcel Energy, for example.
Whoever's putting underground facilities in should be registered. And
okay.
I would be shocked to hear Xcel or anybody putting in fiber or any of that is not. It's not to say it couldn't happen or hasn't happened. But most of the bigger utilities, very accustomed to the system, and they do everything they're supposed to do, at least that.
All right, thank you.
I'd say nothing ever falls through the cracks, but as a whole, they do everything they're supposed to do.
And I was able to do a quick search in the system, and there's about 75 members that are registered that have ditch or irrigation or both as a facility type that is registered. And so there may be other companies that also have irrigation but are registered with electrical and other facility types. So definitely under 100 ditch and reservoir companies are registered.
And as an example, in Boulder County alone, there's 150 ditch companies just in that one county.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other burning questions that anybody would like to ask? All right. Also, feel free to let me know. I also have contacts with both Carla and Sonatum. So if you have any questions after this or anything like that, please let me know and I can get you their contact information or I can send it to them, whatever makes sense. Thank you all for being on this webinar. I really appreciate you all taking the time out of your day to listen to them. And thank you again, Carla and Sonatum, for being here. We appreciate you answering our questions. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day, and we will see you in a couple weeks. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks
Have a
for
good
your
rest of your
time,
day.
Sonata. Carla.
Over now.